Keep yourself in the loop of everything football on the Golden State Media Concepts Football Podcast. The latest news on and off the field, be it college football, Big Ten, SEC, Big 12, Pac-12, ACC to the NFL. We've got you covered. Listen to the Golden State Media Concepts Football Podcast.
Hello, everybody, and welcome into the latest edition of the GSMC Football Podcast. I'm your host for today's show, Wyatt Krieger. This is my fourth episode with the GSMC Football Podcast. I covered Dak Prescott signing in episode 1. I gave some free agency updates in episode 2, including the Andy Dalton signing with the Bears. In episode 3, I discussed the future of the Saints with Jameis Winston, so if you want to listen to those, you can find them on Spotify, Apple Play, anywhere you want to listen to a podcast, and of course, GSMCpodcast.com. But most importantly, I'm here to bring all of the latest news in the NFL and college football world, so let's get to today's episode. Here we go. As always, be sure to follow, download, and subscribe. Follow us on social media at Twitter at GSMCfootball_football.com. And visit GSMCpodcast.com to enjoy all of the wonderful content Golden State Media Concepts has to offer. So, in today's episode, I'm first going to get into the 49ers' big trade up to number 3 overall in the draft. Huge news in the draft world. All of the implications that has for the draft that is coming at the end of the month and for the 49ers roster as a whole. I'm going to ponder what the New York Jets should do with the coveted number 2 overall pick. I'm going to make a case for and against Sam Darnold with the Jets and give my best insight as to who they should take and why a QB may not be the best option for them. I'm going to get into the Eagles' big trade back in the draft, what that means for the future of their franchise, and finally, I will do my second season preview. So stay tuned for an intriguing team. Going to preview an AFC South, a member of the AFC South 2021 season. So I'll get into all of that. Stay tuned later in the episode to find out who that team is. First and foremost, the 49ers trade up to number 3 overall in the 2021 draft. This was shocking news to me. It came out right after my episode released on Saturday or on Friday after I had sent over my episode. But I normally just was not expecting draft news to come this early. I feel like most years the draft news comes a lot closer to the draft. The draft is still 3-4 weeks away. But the 49ers did it, and they're aggressive. So they traded the 12th overall pick, a 2022 third-round compensatory pick, and first-round picks in 2022 and 2023 for the Miami Dolphins' number 3 overall selection. So the Dolphins moved to 12, where the 49ers were previously listed, and now the 49ers move up to 3. So what does this mean? First of all, they swap a total of 3 first-round picks. Is that smart to do? I think it is. If they like the guy, if they're convinced on one of these quarterbacks enough, and they're confident that they can get him at number 3, I think it's a great move because at this point, the 49ers roster is loaded. They're trying to win now, and all they need is that future franchise cornerstone to kind of move that roster forward and push them over the hump. So they need to get the future of the franchise right while the roster, coach, and core are relatively young and talented like they are. But overall, I think this is a great move by 49ers GM John Lynch because he's been aggressive. He really inherited a mess in 2017. They were coming off all the Colin Kaepernick drama, the Jim Tom Sula era, which was really fun while it lasted. Brian Hoyer was his first quarterback when he got there. He's made aggressive moves since. He traded for Jimmy Garoppolo, drafted George Kittle as a 5th-round pick, one of the better draft picks in the past 3-4 years that's happened, 4 or 5 years that's happened in the NFL, just in terms of the value that he got that late in the draft. He hired Kyle Shanahan as his next head coach, which was incredibly smart move and has drafted incredibly well. So I'm going to get into the overall talent on the roster later, but first of all, what does this move mean for the San Francisco 49ers? So it's pretty much a foregone conclusion now that the 49ers are going to take a quarterback with the number 3 overall pick. It's the only reason they would move that far up is to take a franchise quarterback with that pick. So it is rumored that the 49ers have been attempting to move up into the top 5 of the draft for several weeks now. And overall, the 49ers have said, since making this trade, the 49ers have said that Jimmy Garoppolo is their guy. And they have no plans to trade him. He's their starter this year. All of that coaches speak, all of that GMs speak, but I really just don't buy it. I think coaches and GMs do this a lot where they kind of just don't want to force their hand and want to leave all options open, but I don't know. This could mean if they really, truly want to keep Jimmy Garoppolo along for next season and want him to be the starter, this could mean they want to take more of a project QB. Someone who, like Trey Lance or maybe Justin Fields, who doesn't have as much experience and maybe you think needs more refining at the quarterback position, so he'll have a year to sit behind Jimmy Garoppolo. But this could also mean that they want to take. I mean, that's the thing is they have the option at any of these 4 or 5 quarterbacks, depending on who the Jags and the Jets take. But it's just overall, I wouldn't see them making a move for a quarterback who is NFL ready at this point. Because if you want him to sit behind Jimmy Garoppolo and he's NFL ready, that seems like a waste of years to me. So they could draft for someone who can develop. They could draft for someone with more experience. I don't know. A lot of that still has to kind of play out. The 49ers still have 9 draft picks in 2021. Can still find weapons and defensive players late in the draft. John Lynch has proven that. It is understood that they want to get a quarterback, but do they really like one guy that the Jets won't take? Because I'm going to get in the Jets move later, but the Jets at number 2 could really foil the 49ers' plans if they draft their guys. So it's going to be really interesting to see who the 49ers have kind of prepped for, because they have to have multiple guys in mind for this draft. And normally you have one guy that you really like. I think that's how most GMs kind of operate, most GMs and head coaches. But this quarterback draft is loaded, so I think they're doing their full due diligence on all of these guys, and they might have more than one candidate that they're really attracted to at that number 3 spot. So this trade for the Dolphins also means that the Miami Dolphins are going to stick with Tua Tagovailoa. I think this is a solid move overall for the Dolphins. I guess I would have taken one of the quarterbacks at that number 3 spot. I would like to take a swing. It seems like these quarterbacks are going to be more generational talents, and the jury's still out on Tua, but I like it. I like head coaches showing trust. I like to see coaches letting quarterbacks develop and not just kind of throw them off into the wind after one bad year. He's still young. I think there's still potential as a future NFL star for Tua. I could still see it, but there's a lot of work to be done, and the Dolphins can now really build around Tua. And so they subsequently traded that 12th pick that they got from the 49ers to Philadelphia, and they got 2 first-rounders for the 6th overall pick. So it seems to me that they're going to try to take the best receiver on the board, and they probably have someone in mind at that position. But overall, I'm going to get into what that trade means for the Dolphins and Eagles later in this episode, because it's kind of a lot to unpack when it comes to that trade that came off of this 49ers trade. So what does this mean for Jimmy Garoppolo? I don't know. It's a tough situation for the 49ers because Jimmy Garoppolo to me is the definition of an average NFL quarterback. He's a guy that can win you games in the regular season, can play consistently enough and make enough throws to get paid big money in free agency. But I just don't think he will ever really bring a team over that hump. And it showed in the Super Bowl against Kansas City. He had a key overthrow late in the game, and the 49ers had Kansas City on the ropes. And if they had a quarterback that was a true franchise number one QB, then they easily win that game against Kansas City. But you kind of have to limit what you do around Jimmy Garoppolo if you want him to be successful. And I think he's another one of those guys where everything needs to be almost perfect around him for that team to be good. And 2 years ago, the 49ers had everything perfect around him. They had a perfect running game. Kyle Shanahan is one of the best offensive minds in the NFL. I've said that over and over and over again. And their defense was incredible. So Jimmy Garoppolo had a great supporting cast last year, dealt with injuries. But look, so although they said they won't trade him this year, I think he can still be a valuable asset in the future. They can get a lot of capital just for trading him to a quarterback-needy team. And overall, last season, he played only 6 games. He dealt with 2 high ankle sprains that kept him out for most of the year. He was 3-3 in those contests that he played in, threw for around 1,000 yards, 7 touchdowns, 5 interceptions, really nothing special. His last healthy season, though, he was solid, and they went to the Super Bowl. They were an incredible team. NFC champs, 4,000 yards, 70% completion percentage, but again, he's not going to make jaw-dropping plays that wow you. He's going to really run the offense. They had a great running game. They're going to run some play action, some misdirection, and really kind of conjure up, scheme up receivers and get them open. So the 49ers, with this move, I think they really want a franchise cornerstone, and that's not what Jimmy Garoppolo is. So overall, the move on from Jimmy is inevitable in San Francisco. So what's the deal with these Mac Jones rumors? Because initially, when the 49ers made this trade, there were a lot of rumors that the 49ers really wanted Mac Jones. And this was confusing to me because, so overall, John Lynch and Kyle Shanahan attended Mac Jones' pro day over Justin Fields. Now, the 49ers had scouts at the Ohio State pro day watching Justin Fields, but I thought that was alarming, the fact that the 2 most important guys in the franchise went to Mac Jones' pro day over one of Justin Fields, who's a higher prospect in my eyes. There are reports coming out that say Mac Jones fits Kyle Shanahan's offense perfectly. This move, to me, really just wouldn't make any sense. I like Mac Jones. I discussed him at length in last week's episode. But to me, he has a higher chance of being a Jimmy Garoppolo-type quarterback rather than Justin Fields does to be a future star in the NFL, or a Trey Lance project does to be a future star in the NFL. Because if Jimmy Garoppolo were to start this year like they say, that would make even less sense to bring in Mac Jones, because Mac Jones seems like he's one of the more ready NFL quarterbacks in this draft class. But overall, why would they trade up that much when Mac Jones was likely to be available at 12? And I get you have to be, if you really love Mac Jones, you're in the 49ers, you have to take that perspective, and you have to be certain, and you have to be sure that he's going to be there. So number 3 kind of ensures that you're going to get him. But I don't know. This seems like a move for one of those higher prospects like Fields, like Wilson, like Lance. But look, the NFL draft, you literally never know what's going to happen. You don't know what these teams are really thinking. It's just so much buzz, so much rumors, and that's why everything can change. Everything's a fluid situation. But overall, who I think they should take is, it's going to come down to what kind of quarterback does Kyle Shanahan want. So if they really want Mac Jones, is it the fact that they want a quarterback that can really just run their offense the way Kyle Shanahan wants it, and someone that has that high football IQ, someone that won a lot of games at Alabama? And I get the concerns with Mac Jones, the people that say the team around him was incredible. He had first-round offensive linemen, first-round wide receivers all over him, all around him. Najee Harris, top running back, projected first-round pick in this draft, is another example of that. But I didn't see a lot of people making those kind of excuses for Joe Burrow when he was coming out. Now, I will agree that Joe Burrow is an overall just better prospect than Mac Jones, but people weren't making that same excuse that Joe Burrow's supporting cast was incredible. He had first-round picks all around him too. So I think it depends. It really depends year to year. But overall, like I said, I think Kyle Shanahan wants someone who can run his offense. Kyle Shanahan's a guy who schemes guys open a lot, is one of the brightest offensive minds in the league, and he needs a QB that will be able to kind of understand these defenses. When Kyle Shanahan puts you in a situation, he's going to be like, all right, I think one of these two defenses is going to be out there. Look at this linebacker. If you make the read on him, these two guys are going to be open. Just put it in the right place. So I think Mac Jones kind of fits that mold and the ability to make quick decisions in that offense. But to me, I think they should take Justin Fields. And it's the more I think about it, the more I really wonder why his draft stock has seemingly fallen for absolutely no reason at all. No reason at all. And I just don't get it, because I get Zach Wilson, everyone fantasizing over Zach Wilson, but Justin Fields has been like a top one. It's been 1A and 1B with him and Trevor Lawrence the past 2-3 years as just elite quarterback prospects, and it seems like Justin Fields has fallen to 4-5 on some guys' overall quarterback charts, behind Trey Lance, behind Mac Jones, and I just don't know. I think this guy did it at a high level, and the overall size and athleticism and arm strength that he has, he ran a 4.44 40 at his pro day, which was absurd. I think his ceiling is the highest of any quarterback in this draft. I kind of predict him as being almost a bigger Kyler Murray. Obviously, he's not as fast as Kyler Murray, but he has that blazing speed, and he almost has the more of like a Dak Prescott type frame on him where he can run through guys too. So if Justin Fields really isn't their guy, I think Trey Lance out of North Dakota is a better pick than Mac Jones. And here's why, because I would rather the 49ers, if I'm the 49ers, I would rather take one of these more project quarterbacks, one of these guys that you have to kind of convince yourself into and maybe let sit and develop for a year. Because overall, you take Trey Lance with that pick, you let Jimmy Garoppolo play it out, kind of prove to other NFL teams what he has available. You're able to trade Jimmy Garoppolo for all sorts of draft capital, future players, etc. And then you have that Trey Lance quarterback who kind of has a similar size and potential as Justin Fields, but he's just going to have to sit for a year, learn, and develop, because he doesn't have that much experience in college. And there are some concerns about the overall level of competition at North Dakota State, but I think that would be a smarter move. So really, like I said, it's going to come down to what Kyle Shanahan wants out of his quarterback. I get John Lynch has a big say in the decision, but Kyle Shanahan still is going to have the ultimate say. And it's his offense, it's his playbook. He knows what quarterback fits best, so I trust Kyle Shanahan to make the right decision no matter what. Here's the thing, though. The 49ers better hurry, because the roster around Jimmy Garoppolo and whoever this new quarterback is going to be is really good. And so overall, last year they were 6-10. They're the most injured team of all time. I'm going to name some of the guys that got injured for them last year, some key players. Jimmy Garoppolo, George Kittle, Nick Bosa tore his ACL, Dee Ford, the new defensive line signing, Solomon Thomas, former first-round pick. Also on the defensive line, Raheem Mostert was hurt a lot of the year. Starting center Ben Garland was hurt. Tight end Jordan Reed was hurt. And that is just to name a few of the injuries that they dealt with. But they were still in the playoff hunt last year, and they were still winning games. They beat the Cardinals in the last game of the season for absolutely no reason. And that just shows kind of how good Kyle Shanahan is and how he's able to win games with just not that talented of a roster. So I think they better hurry, because John Lynch has added some incredible talent on both sides. On offense, they have one of the best rushing attacks in the league, both because of the talent they have and Kyle Shanahan's overall scheme in that offense. They re-signed Trent Williams in the offseason. Brandon Ayuk was a first-round rookie last year, that wide receiver out of Arizona State. I loved him. I thought he shined when he got the ball, and Kyle Shanahan's going to keep trying to get him the ball in more creative ways. They have Jeff Wilson, another good running back. They lost Kendrick Bourne, and they really do need another wideout. On defense, they have Fred Warner, who's an all-pro, arguably the best linebacker in the league. Nick Bosa, D4, Javon Kinlaw, who played well last year. Solomon Thomas. They have one of the best defensive fronts in the NFL for sure. They need some upgrades at cornerback after losing Richard Sherman, so it's going to be crucial that they kind of build that in with all their picks in this year's draft, while they don't have many future first-round picks. But overall, a roster with this much talent doesn't last forever, and you really need to capitalize and let that quarterback shine ASAP. So I think whatever decision they make, they should let that quarterback play as soon as possible, as soon as they truly feel comfortable, because look, they got to capitalize, and it's hard to keep rosters like this together for long, and guys are going to need bigger contracts, guys, and they're not going to be able to keep everyone. They're not going to be able to keep this much talent together. So I think it's really an essential move that they get the roster shored up and find that quarterback that can lead them to a Super Bowl. So that wraps up my 49ers talk for today. I'm going to get into a quick commercial break before I get into the Philadelphia Eagles starting their rebuild. You are listening to the GSMC Football Podcast, brought to you by the Golden State Media Concepts. I'm your host, Wyatt Krieger, and I will be right back.
Are you looking for help for your fantasy football team? Check out the GSMC Fantasy Football Podcast. Get today's best advice on who to start, who to sit, even who you should draft. From sleeper picks to red-hot lineups, they got it all covered for you. That's GSMCpodcast.com/fantasy-football-podcast. We'll cover traditional leagues, dynasty, PPR, even IDP leagues. When you need fantasy help, there's just one show to hit up. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
All right, everybody, how are we doing? Welcome back to the GSMC Football Podcast. I'm your host for today, Wyatt Krieger. For my second segment of today's episode, I'm going to dive into some more draft talk. I actually just got a great notification on my phone. I'm recording this on April 1st. This will come out Saturday, April 3rd. But look, I just got a notification. The NFL draft is officially 4 weeks away from tonight, April 29th. Here we go. I'm so excited for this draft. One of the more intriguing drafts in quite some time, just because of all the quarterback volatility that's going to happen in the first round and all of the overall franchise-changing players that are also available and will become available later in the draft with all the quarterbacks, with all the need for quarterbacks. But I'm really going to dive into the Philadelphia Eagles, their decision to trade back in the draft with the Miami Dolphins. I'm going to get into what that means for Miami, as well as for the future of the Eagles and why their fans aren't too happy. A lot to talk about when kind of breaking down these trade backs, what they're getting in compensation, what they're trying to do with total draft picks moving forward. But first and foremost, I'm going to get into why the Eagles made this decision in the first place. So, the Nick Sirianni era. The Nick Sirianni era is off to a hot start in Philly. Philly fans are already upset. Nick Sirianni was a former coach in Indianapolis with Frank Reich. He was around a great football culture in Indianapolis, obviously around some great football minds and around a great team with a lot of talent. So it's going to be interesting to see what Nick Sirianni can bring to this Eagles organization that really needs a true leader. So the Eagles traded the number 6 overall pick to the Dolphins for the number 12 overall pick. So the Eagles trade back to number 12, so the Dolphins move up to that number 6 spot. A 4th rounder. They got a 4th rounder in this year's draft and a 2022 first rounder from the Dolphins. Another key contingency of this trade, or of the Eagles draft picks moving forward, is that the Indianapolis Colts, if Carson Wentz plays 75% of the Indianapolis Colts snaps, or if he plays 70% of the snaps and Indianapolis is able to make the playoffs, kind of a weird little kink in the contract or the trade clause. But so if he's able to play 75% of the snaps or 70% of snaps and Indy makes the playoffs, the Eagles will get a 2022 first-round pick from that. That's 3 first-round picks in 2022. That's really what you need if you're a rebuilding team. But overall, outside looking in, I can see why Eagles fans are upset. It's really just not a good look for an NFL franchise overall. Eagles fans, they don't have Carson Wentz. They have question marks at QB with Jalen Hurts, and they didn't really make any big signings in free agency, which I thought some Eagles fans wanted them to make, but I think that's kind of the position they're in right now. And overall, I think this is the right move because they're still in a position to draft a wide receiver, a really talented wide receiver that could fall to number 12. And they really needed those draft picks to kind of retool the roster. So when I say a team is rebuilding like the Eagles are now, it's hard to do that in the NFL. You can't. It's not like the NBA where you can just purposefully lose and get the number 1 overall pick and find your future of the franchise. It just doesn't work like that in the NFL. Although the Jags are one of the few teams in recent memory to kind of pull this off, it's rare. It's rare that teams can do this. And look, at the end of the day, football is a game that is played at high speed. It's a high-intensity game, and if players are trying to lose or taking plays off, then they're going to get hurt at the end of the day. So it's just not feasible for these players to do that. And most players know that they go all out every play, every week. So it's hard to tank in the NFL, but you can kind of rebuild on the fly in that sense where you can stock up draft picks, kind of suffer the deficiencies to your roster for the now to load up for the future. But overall, my reaction was, wow, the Eagles are really going to start this rebuild, and they're going to start to do it this year with Nick Sirianni. So first of all, I wanted to get into what the Dolphins do now, because the Dolphins are loaded with top picks to surround Tua. It's pretty crazy how the Dolphins maneuvered through drafts and trades in the past 4 years to kind of be in this position where they're at right now. And they've really set themselves up for just a strong future in the next 5 to 10 years. They've really set themselves up. Pretty crazy how this all happened. And I think it started in 2016. So I'm going to get into a little draft story if you don't remember. So in 2016, the Miami Dolphins drafted Ole Miss tackle Laremy Tunsil at number 13 in the draft. Now, if you remember, the only reason he fell to 13 was because right minutes leading up to the draft, there was a video released of Tunsil smoking weed from a gas mask bong. It was pretty much a blackmail attempt, it seemed like, and that was just crazy. I remember watching the draft, being ready, and then they're like, breaking news, and ESPN just puts on the screen Laremy Tunsil smoking a bong out of a gas mask. It was pretty tough to watch because Laremy Tunsil's stock fell. He was supposed to be a top 5, top 7 pick at worst, and he fell past number 10 just because of that video that was released. It turned out that video was from years ago, but nonetheless, teams started to have some questions about Tunsil. He fell to the Dolphins. The Dolphins were like, all right, let's just take him. I don't think this is that big of a deal. They were right. Laremy Tunsil is still a really solid player and was a great prospect at the time. So what did they turn Laremy Tunsil into? So in 2019, 2 years ago, they traded Laremy Tunsil to the Texans for a 2021 first-round pick that they used to deal with the 49ers, which is now the 12th pick. They traded him for the 26th pick in the 2020 NFL draft, the 36th and 102nd picks in the 2021 NFL draft, plus a 2022 first-round pick and a 2023 first-round pick. Look at all of that haul for Laramie Tunsil. That is absurd, and it is crazy that they only got him because of the circumstances that led up to that on draft night. So now the Dolphins have all these picks. They were able to move up in the draft to get the receiver that they really, really want, and they have a chance to add either Jamar Chase or Devontae Smith at 6. These two guys are serious playmakers, can really just shore up that offense and provide Tua with a security blanket that he really needs in Miami. And I think this is just a really intriguing team. They will have loads of young talent in the coming years. They're going to keep bringing it in, and they have a head coach that's a bright young star in this league. So I think it's going to be really interesting to see how they kind of pick in these first rounds in these drafts the next coming years, what positions they're kind of keying in on, and just overall all the young talent on that team. I think it's going to be a fun place to play. It's going to be a place where free agents want to go. And the Dolphins, I'm really excited for the Dolphins to watch them in 2021 just because of all the prospects and all of the, just intrigue. They have a lot of question marks, but a lot of intrigue and a lot of potential on that roster. So the Dolphins, I love this move for them. This means they were really confident, or that's one of their priorities was to get to a number 1 wide receiver. Now they do that. With this number 6 pick, they could always pick someone else, someone like a linebacker like Micah Parsons. Who knows what they have in mind, but I would assume that they're going to try to get receiver at this position in the draft. But why are Eagles fans upset? Because Eagles fans, some were happy. I don't think you ever want to see your team kind of making moves to rebuild because football fans are so in the now and want to win now and are going to try to just do everything they can to see a Super Bowl. And they really just want to see a Super Bowl. They want to see teams go to the playoffs, and they don't want to see 7-9, 8-8 teams. So the Eagles fans were upset. I think they really wanted Jamar Chase, and after all the years of missing at wide receiver, they found a guy that they would be able to get at 6 that could fix all those issues right away. So Jamar Chase, I've had Devontae Smith ahead of him on my wide receiver rankings for this year's draft, but Jamar Chase shined at his pro day. He had a 4.38 40-yard dash, a 41-inch vertical. 41 inches. Wow. And he had an 11-foot broad jump. So just absurd athleticism all across the board for Jamar Chase. And I think he's really just an intriguing prospect, and he's moved up a lot of people's draft boards above Devontae Smith. Now, I wouldn't agree with that just because Devontae Smith's the kind of guy that is always open. And if you watch film and you watch highlights, he's wide open every single play, it seems like. But Jamar Chase has that huge big play ability, ginormous catch radius. He has more overall just freakish athleticism than Devontae Smith. So I understand why a lot of teams are moving Jamar Chase up their draft board. So that's a thing. Eagles fans, I think, should calm down because at this position in their draft at number 12, they still have a chance to get a really good wide receiver in Devontae Smith. I don't know if Devontae Smith will be available, but you could still have Jalen Waddle, who a lot of people are moving up their draft boards just because of the speed that he has and he brings to your team, the big playability. Because Jalen Waddle, I've said this the past 2-3 episodes, Jalen Waddle was the number 1 wide receiver at Alabama going into this year. And then Devontae Smith, he gets hurt with a hip injury. Devontae Smith comes in and just takes over. But I think people forgot how good Jalen Waddle truly was and why he was the number 1 wide receiver prospect going in. But overall, I think they could still have a chance at Kyle Pitts, although I really just don't. I just don't see Kyle Pitts falling to 12. I think he could with all the quarterbacks going, but Kyle Pitts at his pro day, he's first of all measured in at 6'5", had the longest wingspan, 83 3/8 inches. That's the longest wingspan in NFL or in the NFL today. He weighs 245 pounds, and he ran a 4.48 40-yard dash, I believe. And at that size, is just absurd. And more people saw this. More and more people see that he's like an absolute unicorn at the tight end position. But overall, for the Eagles, long term, this is the right move for the franchise. I wouldn't mind them targeting Penn State linebacker Micah Parsons. I think they're in a spot where they need to take the best player available. So, no matter who that is, whether it's a receiver, a cornerback who they could take at 12, who they really need to kind of shore up that defense, or a game-changing linebacker in Micah Parsons, they need to draft the best player available at that spot. That's what rebuilding teams should do, in my mind. So, what does this mean for the 2021 team? Jalen Hurts is officially going to get his chance, it seems like. But what supporting cast does he have? Because last year, Jalen Hurts was kind of thrown out into the wolves, had a poor offensive line, no receivers to throw to, and that hurt him. Overall, I think that hurt him because at least hurt, I don't know if that hurt his development, but I think that at least hurt the image of him around the league, just because teams saw him struggle. They saw how the season ended in Philly. But overall, I'm intrigued by Jalen Hurts. I think he can be a star in the league eventually. A lot of it depends on what Nick Sirianni does to develop him and to kind of harness the skill set that he has with the size and speed and strength. But overall, the roster needs a lot of improvement. Whoever they'd pick at this number 12 could be huge. That's why I think I lean towards them getting an offensive weapon for Jalen Hurts to kind of aid his development and regardless have someone to look forward to for the future. The offensive line needs some improvement. They need to get healthier too. They were really banged up last year. They signed Joe Flacco this offseason, and that's really just about it. That's the big move Philly made this offseason, signing Joe Flacco. Is Joe Flacco elite? I don't know. Definitely not anymore. I don't know if he ever was, but they signed Joe Flacco. He'll be kind of a mentor to Jalen Hurts throughout this year. Another kind of intriguing question for the Eagles is receiver Jalen Reagor, because they used a first-round pick on him last year. They drafted him ahead of Justin Jefferson, who was second in Rookie of the Year voting. He was injured, only played 5 games, had 396 yards, 1 touchdown. He showed potential, but I don't think he's a number 1 guy. From what I saw, I think he could be a solid number 2 complement wide receiver in the NFL. He has big play speed, so he can kind of serve as that kind of speed option, deep down the field threat. But I just didn't see enough of it last year. I need to see more of him, and I don't know why the Eagles thought Reagor was going to be the star in over Justin Jefferson, was going to be a future star wide receiver. But nonetheless, that's the decision they made. They have to live with it. So if Jalen Reagor can kind of turn into something, that would be huge for Jalen Hurts. But overall, that roster needs a lot of help. So who will the Eagles now take at number 12? So I said this earlier. I think they should get Kyle Pitts. I don't know if he will be available, but the more I watch all these pro days, all this draft analysis, Kyle Pitts is my favorite prospect for the entire draft. I just think the potential, the overall ceiling that he has at the tight end position in today's NFL, with all of the different things you can do with Kyle Pitts, is higher than anyone in this draft. And I will stand by that, because I listed all the measurables, the freakish wingspan, the freakish catch radius. He's a threat in the end zone, and he literally has blazing speed for the tight end position at his size. I've talked about this before, but some scouts have issues with his kind of tackle breaking ability. I think that will only get better as he continues to get stronger in NFL weight rooms. But I think that overall is the type of generational talent Eagles fans need at this point, with the construction of the roster right now, and with the players they have. They need someone like Kyle Pitts, who Eagles fans can kind of grab onto, because that is who I thought Jamar Chase was going to be for them if they stayed at number 6. Now, that's really all I have for the Eagles. Looking at this situation, it's not pretty right now, but no rebuilds are really pretty right away. So let's hope they can kind of retool, add a plethora of draft picks, and then be competitive this year. And hopefully Eagles fans can see encouraging signs from Jalen Hurts, encouraging signs from their new head coach, and overall kind of give Eagles hope for the future, because right now I don't think this team will be a threat in the NFC East. I just don't see their overall roster just doesn't have the talent. And yeah, I just think the Eagles are in a tough spot. They have a new head coach, and overall, Eagles fans are going to have to be patient with this. They're going to have to let things play out. Be excited about Jalen Hurts. That's the thing. You guys still have technically. It's almost like you guys picked a first-round pick. You picked a first-round quarterback this year in Jalen Hurts because he's truly getting his first year to kind of have the keys of the offense. He's going to get to develop with Nick Sirianni, so you kind of see who he is as a coach and what kind of coaching moves he makes and how he kind of builds this offense around Jalen Hurts. So even if you guys aren't the Eagles fans, Eagles aren't going to win a lot of games this year. I think there's still a lot to watch for, and overall, there's a lot to be excited about, I think. So Eagles fans, I know you're upset. You guys are always upset, but be patient. That's what I would say to you. So that's all for the Eagles. Like I said, before I get into the New York Jets and what they should do in the 2021 NFL Draft, here's a quick word from our sponsors at GSMC. Again, you can listen to GSMC podcasts anywhere you listen to podcasts, Spotify, Apple Play, Google Play. As always, you can go to the GSMC podcast.com to visit our great website. You can explore all the different podcasts and different genres GSMC has to offer overall. So here's a quick word from our sponsors at GSMC. Again, you're listening to the GSMC Football Podcast, brought to you by the Golden State Media Concepts. I'm your host, Wyatt Krieger. We'll be back in a few.
Tired of searching the vast jungle of podcasts? Now listen close and hear this out. There's a podcast network that covers just about everything that you've been searching. Hey! The Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network is here. Nothing less than a podcast bliss with endless hours of podcast coverage. From news, sports, music, fashion, cooking, entertainment, fantasy, football, and so much more. So stop lurking around and go straight out to the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. Guaranteed to fill that podcast itch. Whatever it may be, visit us at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter, and download us on iTunes, SoundCloud, and Google Play.
Welcome back, all you GSMC Football Podcast listeners. I'm your host again, Wyatt Krieger. I'm here to get into my third segment of today's episode. This episode will be coming out on April 3rd. As always, be sure to follow us on Twitter at GSMC_football. Go to GSMCpodcast.com to visit all of our wonderful selection of podcasts that Golden State Media Concepts has to offer. As always, download, like, subscribe, and leave a review if you have the time. You can listen to our podcast anywhere on Spotify, Apple Play, Google Play, anywhere you listen to podcasts, like I said. Today, for my third segment, I'm going to get into the New York Jets. So what are the New York Jets going to do with the number 2 overall pick in this year's draft. I'm going to get into all of that, what this means for Sam Darnold, what this means for new coach Robert Saleh, and what this means for their GM Joe Douglas and what he wants to do for the future of their franchise, because this is a pivotal moment for the Jets. So the Jets, I've raved about their offseason. I loved the signing of Robert Saleh, the former San Francisco defensive coordinator. I think he's one of the best young, bright coaches in the NFL, and I think he's going to be a star. I just can't see him. He's one of the guys where you just can't see not succeeding wherever he goes. So they have the coach. They believe they have the GM in Joe Douglas. The Jets have been one of the worst franchises in the NFL for the past decade, and it's kind of cool to see them finally have a coach that I think is going to be really strong and is going to be able to lead and build a culture in New York, because Jets fans really care about football and New York fans really care about the Jets. So the Jets have a decision to make. They really do, and it's a tough one. I'm going to try to break down all of the ways they can kind of go with this number 2 overall pick, but I don't know. I don't think there's any true one right answer to this question. But now that the draft news has kind of settled, the 49ers are likely to select a quarterback at 3. I got into that. The Jaguars are going to take Trevor Lawrence at 1. So this leaves the Jets right in the middle at number 2. So who are they going to get? And how certain are we that they're going to take a quarterback? If I had to guess right now, my guess would be 70% chance that they take a quarterback, 30% no. That might be too low in the yes department, but I don't know. I feel like there's a part of them that wants to hang on to Sam Darnold, so I'm going to get into all of that. They're going to have to decide whether they want to stick with Sam Darnold, either trade back in the draft or draft a future or someone who can start right away, whether it's an offensive tackle, although they drafted Mekhi Becton last year in the first round, a great tackle. They could still get another one of these high-end prospects like Penei Sewell in this year's draft at tackle. They could also trade back and try to get a defensive cornerstone because they need a lot of help all throughout their roster. But what are they going to do? Here's why I think the Jets need to draft a quarterback right now. So quarterback drafts in the future do not project to be good. Scouts have been talking about this for quite some time, and I think it's a big reason why we're seeing so many teams kind of trade up, and we see all these projections where the top 4 or 5 guys are going to be gone in the top 8 to 10 to 12 picks. And I think that's just because this quarterback draft is really, really strong, and it's one of the strongest ever. If you really look at top to bottom, all the prospects there are, it's one of the strongest ever. And this is another thing that I think the Jets should look at is the 2022 draft. So next year's draft, the quarterback prospects are just not anything special. And there's a reason guys like Justin Fields and Trevor Lawrence, guys were highlighting this 2021 draft class for so long. And 2022, the only prospects you have right now are UNC's Sam Howell, who I like, but I don't know if it's anything truly special. You have Auburn's Bo Nix, who has played terribly, last year. Kedon Slovis from USC, I think he's a good prospect. Spencer Rattler from Oklahoma, if he can show out in Lincoln Riley's offense for one more year, he would be a good selection. But none of these guys have produced nearly as much. And really, just like the point I'm trying to make is that GMs have had this 2021 draft bookmarked for years. There's a plethora of quarterbacks that are both NFL ready and have extremely high ceilings. So this 2021 draft, I think you need to grab a quarterback. And if you're at the position the Jets are in at number 2, I think it'd be smart. So if they have a choice at 2, there's maybe 4 possible stars. If Sam Darnold turns out to be terrible, the Jets would be stuck in quarterback purgatory. So if they don't take one of those 4 quarterbacks at the number 2 spot, not named Trevor Lawrence, if they don't take Zach Wilson, Justin Fields, Trey Lance, or even Mac Jones, I don't know why he's creeped up into this conversation, but he is, and I'm not going to ignore it. So if they just go with Sam Darnold and Sam Darnold turns out to be terrible, the Jets could be stuck in QB purgatory for the next 5-10 years. And that would be a shame because you're going to waste all this potential in your new head coach, Robert Saleh, and you could miss out on a generational talent in this year's draft. So I think you really want to pick one of these guys, and just for the fact that even if Sam Darnold, look, you could still let Sam Darnold play it out on his rookie deal. And if he shines, great. You can trade him for 2 first-round picks, a first and a second, a few starters on defense. I mean, you could use that value that he builds for himself this year in the future. Now, the quarterback position is the most important position in all of sports. That's another reason why I think they should draft a quarterback. I think taking a swing at quarterback at any point in the draft is always good. And if they like a guy enough, they should go for it. A lot of reports, a lot of people now are kind of just assuming that the Jets are going to take Zach Wilson at number 2, but I really don't know, and I just don't think I've heard enough buzz from the Jets end as to enough buzz or rumors from the Jets end as to what they're going to do. So I really just don't know what's going to happen. But like I said, if they like a QB enough, they should go for it. They have the head coach. They have the culture to build around a new quarterback, kind of a fresh start, and they can mold that quarterback into a star. So if they really trust this coaching staff and the abilities that this coaching staff has, I don't see why they wouldn't go for a quarterback, just because you're going to be surrounding them with great young NFL minds that are eager to kind of teach and learn and mold new quarterbacks, a new quarterback into the league. Another thing I think is Sam Darnold's confidence. After all that he's been through with the New York Jets, I think with Adam Gase, his struggles with accuracy and turnovers, overall, I just think his confidence could be ruined, and that's another case scenario where if you want to stick with Sam Darnold, it's you're taking a risk, and you're taking a risk that what if Sam Darnold doesn't turn out to be the guy, which like we've seen so far, he hasn't been the guy. And if you don't do that, then you could be stuck in a bad position moving forward for the Jets. So who should they take at number 2? I think they need to take Zach Wilson. They need to take Zach Wilson. I've gone back and forth on if the Jets should try to just take Justin Fields, but I don't know. I think Zach Wilson is maybe the best. He could end up being the best quarterback coming from this draft, and that's a lot when you compare him to Trevor Lawrence and Justin Fields. But the more I watch his highlights, the more I see Patrick Mahomes. And I know that sounds crazy. He's not going to be Patrick Mahomes. There's just one in 100 billion chance that he turns into what Patrick Mahomes is right now. Patrick Mahomes is, I think, I'm going to say it, he's going to be the best quarterback of all time when it's all said and done. But just the improvisation, I think Zach Wilson provides. He does a lot of sidearm throws, makes incredible throws on the run. It makes it look effortless, running to his left, throwing across his body. And he showed out at his pro day. I think he wowed a lot of people with his overall ability, and so did Justin Fields. Justin Fields was throwing 60-yard dimes on a run, and Zach Wilson was doing the same. I don't think you could really make a mistake with either one of these guys, but I wouldn't be surprised if some GMs have moved Zach Wilson after analyzing the entire draft process. I wouldn't be surprised if some GMs moved him ahead of Trevor Lawrence. I really wouldn't, and I've already heard some of that sort of buzz coming around the league. Not that the Jags are going to deviate from the plan of taking Trevor Lawrence. They are going to take Trevor Lawrence, but that's just the overall potential and skill set that Zach Wilson has. Overall, there are very few flaws in his game that I see. I see accuracy. I see a strong arm. I see kind of the moxie you want out of a starting quarterback, and I see a leader. And I see someone who won a lot at BYU, because overall, when you look at a franchise quarterback, you need a guy that's going to be able to make plays on 3rd and 15 when the rest of your team's not doing well. You get down early in a game. You need guys that can truly lead your team back, truly improvise and make plays on his own, and that's exactly what I see when I watch Zach Wilson highlights, just because he's so talented, and his arm talent is off the charts. I think I could see him making 3rd and 15 throws where he's scrambling around, improvising, guys working open downfield. So Zach Wilson is who I think they should take. Now I'm going to kind of get into the case for why they should stick with Sam Darnold. And who do they draft if they do end up trying to stick with Sam Darnold? Who do they draft with no quarterback? So here's one thing I will bring up, kind of opposite side to my argument, is this draft is so loaded, like I said, but quarterbacks early in the draft can be fool's gold. And I say that because if you look at recent history, a lot of the guys drafted early on in the draft, not counting like Aaron Rodgers, who was drafted in the first round, Patrick Mahomes drafted kind of towards the middle of the first round, Deshaun Watson towards the middle of the first round, in the early on in the first round of the draft. But you look at some of the quarterbacks that have been drafted early. You look at Jameis Winston, Marcus Mariota, Mitchell Trubisky, Sam Bradford, who's not in the league anymore. Robert Griffin III is a backup or maybe even a third stringer for the Ravens. Blake Bortles, all selected high. They're now all on different teams or have been on multiple different teams, and they just didn't work out. So that's where I kind of get into why the team around them needs to be so good, and that's why I kind of also think the Jets need to take quarterback, is because I trust their head coach. But you never know. And if the football culture still really isn't there and they're not ready to develop a quarterback, then it's hard to really just prove it and show out in the league if you're not being coached and you don't have the good team around you. So I think this is interesting. It's an interesting case study because teams saw what the Chiefs did with Patrick Mahomes, and now they're trying to emulate it. And that's the thing, is I see some things in Patrick Mahomes and Zach Wilson, but I know he's not going to be Patrick Mahomes. I see some of that potential, but the team around Zach Wilson matters so much more. And that's why I honestly think when you look at the 49ers, I think anyone who they select is going to end up being good because they have the best, if not one of the best offensive minds in the NFL in Kyle Shanahan. And I think he has a lot of things that make it really easy for young quarterbacks to kind of develop in the league. So the Jets can also have a chance to do that. Like I said, the team around them matters much more. I've always thought if you have solid fronts on offense, a solid offensive line, a solid defensive line, if you run the ball and you play defense, then the rest will kind of follow in the NFL, and you'll be able to win games regardless if you do those 3-4 things. So another thing I could see the Jets doing is trading back, loading up on draft picks from a desperate team that really wants a quarterback. They can take a surefire thing at wide receiver. If they stay at 2, it's hard to see them not picking a quarterback just because of how coveted that position is. So if they don't want a quarterback, I see a draft trade coming up closer to draft time, because at the end of the day, Sam Darnold is still on his rookie year. He still had he's shown some potential throughout his time. And if they stay at 2, there would be no point in them keeping that number 2 pick, because they'll be able to get whatever kind of prospect they wanted at number 2 that's not a quarterback later in the draft, and then they can add more draft picks through that. So like I said, they can take a surefire thing at wide receiver. They can take a surefire thing at defense. Jalen Phillips from Miami would be an elite pass rusher that can produce right away. They can take one of the cornerbacks like Caleb Farley or Patrick Surtain from Alabama if they trade back. Or they could take Micah Parsons, the linebacker out of Penn State. But they would have to trade back relatively not too far in the draft. So I also don't want to kind of ignore a Deshaun Watson trade happening draft night, because literally anything can happen when it comes to the draft. So I'm going to kind of make a case for Sam Darnold. I haven't really talked all too highly of him in this podcast just because I think the Jets should move on. But he really just got a raw deal in the NFL. And this happens to some quarterbacks. This happened to Marcus Mariota, I think, in Tennessee is one example. But Sam Darnold, he got a raw deal going to the Jets. He didn't choose where he got drafted. And in 3 seasons, he's had 2 coaches, 2 offensive coordinators, 2 GMs, and 2 owners, which is just not the ideal continuity that you want with a young quarterback. And if you look at all the great quarterback head coach duos, or a lot of the great quarterbacks, they have that continuity with their head coach, and they have the ability. They have that ability to kind of like learn and grow with their coach as seasons go on and as years go on, and they have that chemistry and rapport built up. Sam Darnold hasn't been able to do any of that with the Jets. He's had new coaches. He had one of the worst coaches in the NFL last year in Adam Gase. He is still on his rookie deal, which I think is important. You can save a lot of money keeping a quarterback on a rookie deal for as long as you can. And he's shown some of that same kind of arm talent and improvisations that people really like out of Zach Wilson. He can make all the throws. He's shown sneaky athleticism and the ability to run. He had a really long touchdown run against the Broncos on Thursday Night Football last year. So he has all the tools. Looking at it, and you look at size, arm strength, overall ability. But the stats, the numbers just are not good, and they're kind of blaring because he has a career below 60% completion percentage. Last year, he had 9 touchdowns, 11 interceptions, 39 career interceptions in 3 seasons, which is pretty rough. Interceptions have been an issue, and he continuously misreads defense. And I think this shows whenever Sam Darnold or Jets teams play the Patriots, Bill Belichick does what he does to young quarterbacks, and he exposes them. And I think it shows kind of where the coaching has been in New York, but also just Sam Darnold's overall inability to read defenses and kind of process things in the NFL. I think that's an issue moving forward. Now, that's not to say he can't be coached up and groomed by a solid offensive mind to be a future starter in the NFL. That's not to say that at all. But overall, some of the deficiencies I've seen are pretty glaring, and it kind of points to the direction of him being a backup in the league. So, like I said, he's shown flashes, but overall in the NFL, consistency is the most important thing at the quarterback position, and you just haven't seen that from Sam Darnold so far. So what else do the Jets have to offer for a young quarterback? They added Corey Davis in the offseason. They added Keelan Cole, a wide receiver. Corey Davis I thought was a great signing. They still have glaring needs at the tight end position. At running back, Frank Gore was still puttering around for them, chugging along. They have glaring needs at linebacker. They kind of needed to completely overhaul that position. And they can still target a lot of those issues in the rest of the draft with those early first-round picks. They'll be in a good position to kind of build those other spots on the defense. They have some intriguing defensive players in Quinn Williams and C.J. Mosley. Those are 2 bright spots on this team. They added running back Tevin Coleman. Maybe they can draft Travis Etienne from Clemson early in the second round. I think that would be really awesome. I think Travis Etienne reminds me a lot of Alvin Kamara. Not with the same speed, but just the overall kind of ability, big play ability to catch out of the backfield. I really love Travis Etienne from Clemson, and although there's those 2 bright spots on defense, I think Robert Saleh will develop and coach up the rest of that defense to be a solid unit in this league. I truly believe that, because when you look at Robert Saleh's defenses in the past, they've always been solid. So overall, the roster, it needs a lot more talent, which I guess that's why you can make the argument for trading back, because there's just too many holes other than the quarterback spot. And then you can keep Sam Darnold on that rookie deal and kind of see how things go from there. But they need more talent, and they need to fill a lot of these holes in the next coming years. So overall, I think the Jets need to take Zach Wilson at quarterback. They got to give their franchise some hope, a guy they can believe in. And although Sam Darnold may have gotten a raw deal, sometimes you just need to change. And the Jets are in a new era, and they have a new head coach. And I think it'd be best for them to start fresh. I truly do. Because I think a lot of Jets fans think that too, because they saw what Adam Gase did to Sam Darnold's confidence in 2020. And overall, I see both sides, but I think the Jets should take Zach Wilson, get rid of Sam Darnold, try to trade him, and get something out of him in return. But overall, that's all I have to say about the New York Jets. I'm really excited to see what they do in the 2021 NFL draft. So I see both sides. I've said my part. I'm going to get into a quick commercial break again before I get into my final segment of the day. You're listening to the GSMC Football Podcast presented by the Golden State Media Concepts. I'm Wyatt Krieger. I'll be right back.
This is your ultimate stop for everything sports. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Should I say more? From the NFL, MLB, the NBA to MMA, it's all in here. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Listen now.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the GSMC Football Podcast. I'm your host, Wyatt Krieger, for today's fourth segment of the episode. I just covered as much of the early first round that you can possibly cover and all of the quarterback drama that's going on, all of the draft trades. I think there's a lot more news still to be broken as far as draft trades and intrigue around the league overall. Just teams trading players for draft picks, teams trading back in the draft, teams trading forward in the draft. So many implications come from all of these moves, and so many dominoes fall from all these moves. So I think it's so exciting to kind of just watch and see how that goes. But for the last segment, I'm going to get into another season preview. This time, I'm going to be talking about an intriguing team in the AFC South. It is the Jacksonville Jaguars. So I'm going to get into all of that, what the signing of Urban Meyer means, the end of the Doug Marrone era, and how the Jaguars are going to do in 2021 with that roster and with that young quarterback, the future in Trevor Lawrence, what they're going to do. So the Jags, they have loads of young talent. They still have a lot of holes in that roster. Like I said, I mean, they're picking first overall, so you'd think there are some holes on that roster. I still think they're a really intriguing team. They pulled off a kind of successful tank in last season, which I think is something you just don't see in the NFL a lot. They were sitting out guys throughout the year. They were really trying to do everything possible to get that number one overall pick for Trevor Lawrence, and they did. But you don't see that a lot. You don't see teams trying to lose like the Jaguars were. Normally you see teams able to win a few games like the Jets last year. Were able to beat the Los Angeles Rams in a surprising game. And even they were able to get 2 wins on the year. But that's in the past. They are on to the future with Urban Meyer. So it's a pretty intriguing coaching change with Urban Meyer. They have the best quarterback prospect since Peyton Manning and Trevor Lawrence. So I'm going to get everything about them in their outlook for 2021. But first of all, it's the end of the Doug Marrone era in Jacksonville. So Doug Marrone was fired after a pretty crazy 4 or 5 seasons in Jacksonville. So in 2016, he took over for 2 games. The Jags finished last in the AFC South. And then 2017, he had an incredible year. He had one of the best defenses in the league. They had Jalen Ramsey and A.J. Bouye in the secondary. Miles Jack was a young star as a linebacker. They still have him. They had Calais Campbell, Giannis Ngakoue. So just such a good defense that led them all the way to the AFC Championship game. Blake Bortles was their quarterback, so that just shows how far a really good defense can bring you in the NFL. They lose to the Patriots in the AFC Championship game. Should have won that game. Were a few throws, a few plays here and there that easily could have gone Jacksonville's way, and they would have gone to the Super Bowl with Blake Bortles. But that was it. That was 2017. Then you go to 2018. 5-11 record, last place in the AFC South. 2019, 6-10 record, last place in the AFC South. And 2020, we get to last season, 1-15, the worst record in football. So just not a lot of consistency across the board from Doug Marrone teams. And it's pretty absurd. You don't see that much fluctuation where a team does so well in 2017 and they pretty much just shipped everyone out of there. They got rid of Leonard Fournette. They got rid of Jalen Ramsey and Goliath Campbell, Giannis Ngakoue, a lot of those core defensive pieces. And they just started to rebuild because I think what they saw was a team that didn't have a quarterback, a team that needed a quarterback, and they were kind of feeling things out, not really sure what to do. It's kind of staying competitive in that 6-10, 5-11 range, but still in the bottom half of the league. So 2020 was kind of a blessing where they were able to lose a lot of games despite winning their first game against the Indianapolis Colts. That was a shocker. They didn't win a whole game the rest of the year. That's crazy. Like I said, they pulled off a successful tank on the fly. They were purposely sitting out starters against the Bears in the second to last week of the season, which I thought was absurd. They started Mike Glennon over Gardner Minshew. They didn't start their starting running back, James Robinson. Doug Marrone, I thought, was a solid coach. He now finds himself in Alabama as an assistant coach, which is what a lot of people are doing now, that when they get fired from their NFL teams, they're just going to Nick Saban and then finding a new job after that. So they sat starters in games towards the end of the year. Doug Marrone, I thought, was a good coach. Players liked him, but he did kind of have some polarizing relationships with some players that I think rubbed some people the wrong way. And overall, he's a good defensive coach, but the record just doesn't lie. So they hire Urban Meyer, and that was a big splash this offseason. So will Urban Meyer really be good in the NFL? I don't know. I've gone back and forth on this for quite some time. I think he will. I think at the end of the day, what he did in college was just win. So at Florida, when he was at Florida, he turned Tim Tebow into a starting quarterback who just couldn't throw in the NFL. He had a 65-16 record at Florida. Urban Meyer did 2 national titles. And then he goes to Ohio State. He established Ohio State as a premier blue blood program in the country, one of those teams that's always going to be in the playoff conversation every year, no matter what. Had an 83-9 overall record in the Big Ten with Ohio State. That is just an absurd winning percentage, I really think. And he had 1 title, a Rose Bowl, a bunch of bowl games, just a lot of wins top to bottom. So he truly established himself as one of the best college coaches of all time in doing that. And so now he goes to the NFL. So he developed some really bad NFL quarterbacks into stars in college, such as Tim Tebow, like I mentioned, Dwayne Haskins. Braxton Miller was a quarterback for him who played really well before transitioning to a wide receiver. Guys like that. I think there's something to be said that he was really, really good at recruiting, and you don't do that in the NFL at all. You don't recruit, and you can't just pick up all of the best players, the most talented players like you can in college. And so overall, you don't do that in the NFL. And another thing is like that I think you should watch for is that he didn't lose much in the NFL. Like I said, his record, he was 65-16 at Ohio State, or 83-9 at Ohio State, 65-16 at Florida. And that's just not a lot of losses. And he historically just did not handle losses all too well in college. So that's something that I think you need to be able to do in the NFL is handle losses. And so that's going to be a learning curve for him. And college coaches' skill sets don't always really translate to the NFL because when you look at what you need to do in Urban Meyer's position, you really have to motivate guys, work with younger kids. You really have to be a master motivator and recruiter. And NFL, you kind of need to gain more respect. You need to build a culture in the locker room. You need to be able to truly motivate 30, 30-year-old men. And that's just a different task to do. So overall, I think it will work, but I wouldn't be surprised if things took a turn for the worst if there wasn't a great start in Jacksonville. So how sure of a thing is Trevor Lawrence? Because everyone has raved. He's going number one. He's the best quarterback prospect since Peyton Manning. He is a sure thing. I think he's one of the most surefire quarterback prospects since Andrew Luck. I would like to have seen them kind of add more skill position players in the offseason, the Jags, to help Lawrence ease into the NFL. They could still target some guys in the draft, but he's a sure thing that comes early in the draft. I think they're going to run sort of a modern, dynamic spread offense. You kind of utilize his mobility, use his height to his advantage. I think his height's going to be such a interesting skill set in the NFL. And you look at what Justin Herbert was able to do last year in the NFL, for the Chargers with his height and his overall athletic ability. I think Trevor Lawrence can do that and then some. And that's saying a lot considering Justin Herbert was the Rookie of the Year and had a phenomenal season. Really looks like an emerging star in this league. One guy I would really like to see them target in the draft is Rashad Bateman out of Minnesota. I think this guy's a true number one wide receiver for any team, and I think he will start right away. Another one of those guys, kind of like Devontae Smith, where if you watch the highlights, they're open just all the time. And he's a really intriguing prospect. I don't know if he'll fall to first pick of the second round, but man, if they can pair up Trevor Lawrence with Rashad Bateman, that would be something to watch. So here's some kind of players to look out for on their team going into 2021. They added Shaquille Griffin. They re-signed the corner from Seattle, who really showed some promise, and I think he adds a little bit of toughness to this defense. So that's going to be their number one corner. They re-signed tight end Dan O'Shaughnessy. No matter what, they need to give Trevor Lawrence a reliable tight end option. I think that's huge for young quarterbacks. They re-signed cornerbacks Trey Herndon and Sidney Jones, and signed safety Rashawn Jenkins. They also added Marvin Jones, who was a big free agency acquisition. He's kind of on the latter half of his NFL career as a receiver, but can still make plenty of big plays. They added Roy Robertson-Harris from the Bears. He got a big payday. I thought that was a great move. I loved Roy Robertson-Harris in his time in Chicago. They franchise tagged Cam Robinson, their left tackle, because you can't go into a season no matter what. A lot of teams thought they would let him go, but a lot of people thought they would let him go, but you can't go into an offseason where you're starting or you're going to pick a future franchise quarterback and not have that left tackle position shored up, so they did that. And I also love their new running back from last season, James Robinson. He was a late-round pick. Just absolutely shined in Jacksonville. And he was another example of a running back that you can grab late in the draft that just produces right away. And he is really intriguing. I think they're going to use him a lot of different ways. They still have Miles Jack on defense, that linebacker, who I think is going to be a star someday. He's emerged into as one of the more freakish athletes at the linebacker position in his early NFL career. They have DJ Chark and D.D. Westbrook, along with Laviska Shenault as wide receivers. I think those are some intriguing playmakers, but they still need to get that true number one guy. So here's kind of where I have them stacking up against the AFC South. I'll kind of get into my overview of this division as a whole. This is one of the worst divisions in the NFL in my eyes. I wouldn't say one of the worst, probably one of the more middle-of-the-road divisions in the NFL. I have them ranking third in the AFC South behind both the Colts and the Texans. Or the Titans, not the Texans, I'm sorry. So for the Colts, the Carson Wentz era begins. They went 11-5 last year. I think they're going to win the division. I think they'll be in first place when it's all said and done. I think Frank Reich will be able to get enough out of Carson Wentz, although I don't think he's the same quarterback that he once was when he was an MVP candidate. I think Frank Reich will be able to get enough out of him this season, and that team is just so good. They have by far the best roster in this division, top to bottom, and they have very few holes. And you saw that they really should have beaten the Buffalo Bills. If you look at a couple plays, Philip Rivers overthrew Michael Pittman on a 4th and goal situation where they went forward before the end of the half that led directly to some Buffalo Bills points. So the Colts easily could have been in the divisional round of the playoffs. So Carson Wentz era begins. I'm excited to see that play out, but I think they'll finish first in that division. The Titans lost Corey Davis, and now it's going to be up to Ryan Tannehill, Derrick Henry, and A.J. Brown to kind of lead that offense. Can Ryan Tannehill really lead them to a Super Bowl? I'm not sure yet. I think he's a guy that can lead you to a Super Bowl. I don't know if he can win you a Super Bowl, But above all else, they need that defense to be fixed first because the offense really isn't the issue at all. And they need their defense to be just a lot better than it has been. And I know that doesn't sit well with Mike Vrabel. So they added Bud Dupree as a pass rusher. Still need to improve at that position and get more pass rush. But the Titans, I think still have too much firepower on the offensive end to finish below second in that AFC South division. Then I have the Jags. I think the Jags will be around that 9-8, 10-7 range. No, they won't be 10-7. They'll be 9-8, 8-9, if you will. I'm just trying to get used to this new scheduling, the new 17-game schedule. So I was trying to do the math there, but I think they'll be able to win a lot of games, and I think they'll be competitive within the division. I think Trevor Lawrence is just going to show out right away, and I think Urban Meyer has something to prove, having not coached for the last few years. And above all else, I can't see them finishing below the Texans. We all know where the Texans are at right now. We don't know what's going to happen with Deshaun Watson. I'm going to get into some of that soon, but the Texans right now, their starting quarterback looks to be Tyrod Taylor. If Deshaun Watson holds out and or gets traded, they added a lot of pieces in the offseason, nothing really too noticeable, kind of just filling voids in their roster. But overall, the Texans are going to be somewhat of a dumpster fire for the next year or two, at least until they figure out the quarterback position. So I have that division as one of the middle tier divisions. I have the Colts finishing first, the Titans finishing second, the Jags finishing third, and the Texans finishing last. So that was my Jags season preview. I'm going to get into some remaining NFL news storylines. The first being the Deshaun Watson allegations. I've talked about these the last 2 episodes. I'm just going to briefly cover it because there's not much to update on. But the allegations are up to 21 different counts. It continues to be a really murky situation of people accusing Deshaun Watson of sexual misconduct during massages. Different masseuses have been coming out and saying that Deshaun Watson was inappropriate and had inappropriate behavior. Deshaun continues to remain silent. His lawyer continues to back up Deshaun. There was also a former Texans masseuse who voiced her opinions publicly on the situation, saying the allegations seemed unrealistic. But either way, I've said this week in, week out, it's an awful look for Deshaun Watson, and it will be certainly interesting to see how that plays out for the rest of the year. So the NFL also made it official that there's going to be a 17-game season. They added another game. I really don't like this move. I like it, and the football fan in me likes it just because, hey, more football, an extra week to watch games on a Sunday. That's beautiful. But I think overall this could lead to a less enjoyable product with just another game adds more opportunity for injury, more opportunity for star players to get hurt. And I think you're seeing that right now with a lot of players who are just uncomfortable with this 17-game season. So you'll see a lot of guys kind of sitting out games later in the year. Overall, I'm not sure what this does. Obviously, the NFL gets to make more money on another week, but it's just weird. Not having a even number season, you can't go 8-8 this year. Like, you can't go 8-8. That's just not football. Because I like just seeing 8-8. You know where we're at. We're 500. That's where we are. 9-7, 10-6. That's perfect. It flows off the tongue. But now we're talking about 10-7, 9-8. Like, it's an odd number, so that's just going to be different. And overall, I don't know. I don't know how to feel about it. I like that we get to watch an extra game, but I don't think the players like it at all. A lot of players have already voiced their opinions on it. Some owners voted against it, but overall, a majority said, let's do it, because at the end of the day, they want their money too. So let's see how that plays out in the offseason and in the regular season as well. So Dan Snyder, in some other news, Dan Snyder, the Washington football team owner, officially bought out the remaining 40% stake in the Washington football team. Buys out majority ownership. That's concerning if I were a Washington football team fan. Hopefully he continues to let Riverboat Ron Rivera do his thing, and Ron Rivera can kind of lead that team out of the horrible culture that Dan Snyder has really built in Washington. But overall, I wouldn't be too happy about this if I were a Washington fan. He's one of the worst owners in the NFL. A lot of people, I remember growing up, people used to say he runs his team like a fantasy football team. So I don't know how comfortable Washington football team fans feel with him making the decisions for the future, but he's going to be hovering around for a while. So there you go, Washington football fans. So that's really all I have to get to in today's episode. I really appreciate everyone for listening to the GSMC Football Podcast. Again, I'm your host, Wyatt Krieger. Follow me on Twitter at WKrieger3. You can follow the GSMC Football Podcast Twitter at GSMC_football. As always, like, download, subscribe, leave a review. You can listen to our podcasts on Spotify, Apple Play, Google Play, anywhere you listen to podcasts, and visit our beautiful website at gsmcpodcast.com/sports for more podcasts. And you can also find all of our other entertainment and different categories of podcasts as well. Thank you guys. I had a lot of fun discussing everything draft and news in the NFL. So I hope you guys have a great weekend. Happy April. Happy opening day in the MLB. That's starting this weekend. So have a great one, football fans. I'll be back next week.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Football Podcast, part of the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to find all the shows from the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network, from movies to music, from sports to entertainment, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's program.